It's Over Opinionated.
Hey everybody, I have a guest today. Titus is a pro-life activist and he agreed to come on the show. How you doing, Titus?
I'm doing good, man. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, it's great to have you on. So, you're driving, and if, anybody hears a baby in the background, that's totally fine. So, that's kind of how the pro-life people roll, so.
Yeah, very pro-life, and we try to bring our kids to everything we can. And it's kind of cool to show people what we're fighting for, and that's, we kind of have families, so
okay.
I think it's a large part of it.
Absolutely. So, would you mind telling just the audience or exactly all that you do with your job?
Yeah, so I work for Students for Life Action, which is like Students for Life of America, but political. So Students for Life of America has been around since the 80s. We reorganized and changed the name back in 2006. There's about 1,400 student groups at middle school, high school, college, a few younger professional groups, med school, law school. But we're really pretty prolific. I think we're one of the top conservative student groups in the country. We've been around for a long time. And then I work for the 501c4 issue advocacy group, Students for Life Action. And so we actually engage in legislation. We organize our students for lobbying and for outside pressure. And then we engage in elections when there's a pro-life policy implication to them. So I run a public policy fellowship for some of our student leaders who are more political, and then engaged in lobbying, training, and a lot of election work.
That's awesome. So, look, when it comes to lobbying, how do you go about doing that? You go inside the state capitals and you talk to them and...
Yeah, so, our model is very outside confrontational. So we're doing, sometimes people lobby and they go and they make friends with everybody and they make sure they have everyone's contact and they make sure everyone likes them and they try to provide any answers they can in terms of information. And that works in some issues, and it works in some areas of the life issue. But if you want to get a bridge bill or you want money appropriated for your district or for the pregnancy resource centers even, that kind of lobby can really work. But when you're talking about more confrontational things like passing abortion bans, it does take a really strong confrontational approach to hold Republicans accountable. A lot of them will claim they're pro-life until it's time to do the pro-life thing. And then you really have to spend significant resources kind of educating their voters what they're doing. So if they vote the wrong way in the legislative session, it's a lot of where we come in is trying to show, hey, there's a large number of angry voters who don't like what you're doing, and you better watch yourself in primary season, and really just doing what we can with political pressures to hold them accountable, and to communicate that there's voters who care what's going on, whether we're kind of connecting them via email, mail, calling, or postcards or door knocking. There's all kinds of different methods we use to convince voters to talk to their legislator and help them understand that life is a priority for them.
That's awesome. So when it comes to primary season and targeting certain races, I'm sure there's a lot of Republicans that claim to be pro-life, but if they are pro-life, they're not doing much. And how do you determine who you go after in a primary?
Yeah, so, you look for political sincerity. So there's different indicators of whether someone is sincere about their pro-life commitments. And then, of course, you're comparing them to challengers. You're comparing them to an open primary, just various other people who may not have much on. But I think the key is the biggest thing is if they have actually forced a vote, forced a roll call on pro-life legislation or sponsored something that they didn't get praise from leadership. Public leadership often is attacking these people when they introduce a heartbeat bill and making their life miserable. And so if you see someone who actually is carrying pro-life legislation and taking heat for it, that's someone that we obviously as a pro-life movement need to get behind and help. then after, like, obviously a record of voting for and forcing votes on stuff, if they've sponsored and co-sponsored pro-life legislation, that becomes a big deal. Then you look at their public statements, their private statements, and then you look at usually a written record is kind of what we use as our bare minimum. So we send out a survey program to all these legislators. And if you, Josh, or if anyone else is listening, like if you see pro-life legislators we should know about, I mean, you can connect them to us and we'll vet them and see if that's something that we're worth getting involved in. But you vet them, and then the big thing, I think, is looking at people who didn't do the right thing and preparing to help their opponents. So, for example, in Indiana, we were the first state to have a special session after Roe was reversed, and so we showed up and we had this battle over legislation that ended up being weaker than it should have been, and we have roll call votes where we can see whether someone wanted exceptions in the law, whether they tried to strengthen it, whether they didn't want to strengthen, whether they liked the final product, whether they didn't. And so there's people who were trying to weaken this bill and who, some of them even came out publicly and still opposed it at the end. Those are the people who should be the biggest targets. So, like, we have state senators who said, we don't want an abortion ban, but we only want a 15-week abortion ban with exceptions. Well, in Indiana, there aren't any abortions done after, like, 13 weeks, unless it's for these exceptions. So they were advocating to do nothing, essentially, right? But to make it look like they did. So that state senator specifically, his name's Kyle Walker, is someone who's definitely on the top of the target list. And there's representatives who had always voted for the pro-life legislation that came in front of them, but it had never been very significant because they're worried about Roe and they're trying to do things that would pass. And they came out during the special session and said, oh, yeah, we're pro-life, but, you know, what we mean by that is we're also pro-choice, too, and we support women's rights, and so we don't support abortion bans even though we're pro-life, which, I mean, it's clear as mud, but those are the people who deserve primary challenges, too. So the real key is making sure whatever happens in the legislative season, there's a response to it, there's a consequence to it when it comes to elections. And so that's, I mean, that it's tied to vote, it's tied to their behavior, and we're trying to make sure their behavior determines whether voters bring them back or not.
Yeah, it's politicians get very clever with their words, and you know, I've noticed a lot. A lot of pro-choice people will never say I'm pro-abortion, because a lot of them, some of them are now, but that's very recent. A lot of them shy away. Like most Americans don't see abortion as a good thing. A lot of them might see it as a necessary evil, but nobody says, you know, that's a good thing. So it's
I think it's two things that you're kind of talking about there. So one thing is that politicians hate to be on the record, especially controversial things. They don't want people to know exactly what they believe. They're scared about what voters will think when they put themselves out there on these controversial things at all. So they do everything they can to avoid being put on the spot. And then when they do have to do something, they do as little as possible. So they'll like pass resolutions that don't actually enact in the law, or they'll make a task force so that they can study it and then decide not to do it next year. So there's a lot of claiming victory when they haven't actually done much too. And they definitely will try to like get the least they can. They'll give as little as possible to get the activists to stop bothering them. So they just wanted you to go away, and they want to do as little as possible to make that happen.
Yeah, I can understand that. You want to keep your seat and everything. So yeah, and that I have a question though with all these states, because almost basically the majority of the South, with the exception of Virginia, has passed some measure of pro-life law that bans abortion to some degree. But when we have exceptions like rape and incest, or some some imperfection or something, how does that go about being proven? And a lot of times it goes past the 6 or 10 or 15 mark, whatever they're passing. So if you're 16 weeks pregnant, can you just go to a Planned Parenthood and say I was raped and get an abortion, or how do you work around that? Okay.
So it varies a lot based on what state you're in. So in Indiana right now, they passed the abortion ban that's going into effect August 1st, 2023. And with that, the exceptions they added in, there is an exception if the mother claims that she was a victim of rape or incest, and there's no enforcement really to that. So a lot of states require a signed affidavit, or a lot of them a police report. So that way you have something tangible and you can go after this rapist, and you can actually stop them, right? But in Indiana, there's no sort of enforcement. The Democrats were very insistent that that would be re-traumatizing the women involved. And so the way it's set up, where after August 1st, is that at the hospitals, when they want to get an abortion, they're not really allowed to ask them what happened or transpired for it. So even though it's just for those exceptions, they're not required to explain what the exception was. And so it could be this massive loophole, but we don't really know until it's enforced and we see what happens. Some states have good abortion law reporting systems in place, and some don't, so that varies a little bit.
Yeah. Well, the problem is if you don't have something there, someone could just claim that they were raped if they weren't and go to an abortion facility and get an abortion. I get that's always been the workaround in my mind is, I don't know how you could stop that without trying to do like an investigation, and the Democrats would never be okay with that.
Yeah. And a signed affidavit would be one thing, so that at least know what the reason is, so we can discuss that, and we can discuss and find out, okay, this percentage are due to sexual assault or due to a fetal abnormality, and then we could understand what the exceptions still were being allowed and what percentages those were. So that's what we kind of, I'm losing my train of thought a little bit, so much for this. But yeah, I mean, there's exceptions in the law, and a lot of these states aren't going to have great enforcement on what they are, for sure. What we're looking at right now with a lot of these southern states that have actually passed a significant ban is strengthening the enforcement as we do get some metrics back and some data back on what's going on. That'll be something we can use in these states to call for the next steps. There's a lot of things that are kind of post-row legislation. So, for example, in Kentucky, they have banned abortion. They have significant law, but the state-run medical schools are still teaching the doctor students how to do an abortion. So sometimes the actual state medical programs or the undergrad programs still are promoting. They're promoting abortion as an option, as something that's medically necessary, and their definitions don't necessarily match the legal ones either. So I think in a lot of these Democrat states, they actually talk about abortion in their sex ed. Whereas we could be talking about life, we could be talking about what the science is around when life begins. We can talk about health risks of abortion. So hopefully we'll start seeing some pro-life states actually start stepping up and actually using the government-run institutions when it comes to education to actually teach the truth about abortion too.
Yeah. Well, a few things there. It's always concerned me about the medical community, which is designed for saving life, for those to just talk very nonchalantly about taking life. And it's very obvious to me, I don't have a college degree, but I don't think you have to have a college degree to know that life begins at fertilization. And I've seen these ultrasounds, and they have 3D ultrasounds now that make it just so clear that it's not just a quote-unquote clump of cells, that it's a human being. And I don't know how a doctor who's went through years of school to see how to react with the human anatomy can go, and I don't know how you can do that and then perform an abortion. It's wild to me. It really is.
Yeah, so I think part of it is the medical community and the education systems that exist are spreading a lot of misinformation on this topic. That's part of it. But when you actually look at what these doctors actually believe, especially in the field of embryology, is actually the most relevant. And we do have surveys of them that whether they're pro-life or pro-choice, 96% of embryologists agree that life does begin at fertilization, and that's from the University of Chicago. So it is well established what the facts are. There's still the ethical questions of when does it become a person, and I think the thing that makes the most sense, that when a lot of people understood historically, is as soon as there is a person, you should give them personhood. As soon as there is a living human being in question. So I think it's pretty clear cut. And I think we've seen the consequences throughout history when we try to dehumanize people so that we can change the laws and discriminate against them. But that's probably preaching to the choir. I think these states and kind of figuring out the next step law is definitely interesting and complex. As we're about a year since Roe was reversed, and a lot of these laws are still being tested out, proved by the courts. So it's interesting to see how they're being enforced and what's working, what isn't. So I think it's a really weird, fluid landscape to be in, and actually figuring out what laws are going to stick and how we need to kind of modify them going forward.
Well, and I'll be honest, and maybe I was being pessimistic, but I was one of those guys. I've always cared very much about this issue. This is what got me in politics, and I haven't done nearly as much as you have at all, but I've tried to organize some baby diaper drives for the pregnancy resource centers, and I try to be charitable to them, and just vote Republican, and in the primaries I vote for the most pro-life candidate I can. With that being said, it's I never really thought that I would see the day that Roe v. Wade was reversed, and I'm very happy I was mistaken about that. But
so like Kristen Hawkins, the president of our organization, when she was first getting started back in like 2006, 2007, she had a lot of close mentors tell her, "Hey, Kristen, that was a great speech, but we're going to reverse Roe v. Wade. That's not honest. That's never going to happen." And she was saying like, "Hey, we need to set the vision that we're going to win." And they were telling her like, "You got to back it off. We don't want to get people's hopes up." But I mean, she was right. I had people when I first started working in Students for Life tell me, "Titus, that's ridiculous, right? We're never going to reverse Roe v. Wade." So it is crazy to be in this moment of history and actually be looking at this saying, "Okay, well, we have this opportunity now." And now a year later, 15 states have actually banned abortion and enacted some sort of significant ban like this.
Yeah, it's one of the. It's really
stuff going on.
People that don't care too much about the abortion issue don't see it the way we do. But this really is one of probably the biggest landmark decisions by a Supreme Court, and it's one of the biggest political things I would say, definitely of our lifetime. It's just so important. And instead of talking about trying to get a 20-week ban, because was that not the previous federal landmark with Casey? You could ban up to 20. Okay.
Yeah, so it's. I think a lot of people didn't quite understand it, but yeah, with Casey and with everything that's established, the way the law was currently set up was prior to the second trimester, you really couldn't have any restrictions or bans in place concerning the life of the baby. In the second trimester, you could have some restrictions to help with the mother's health. And so you'd often see that, and the pro-life groups would focus on trying to make sure that abortion facilities fit all the same requirements as hospitals. So you had some stuff working on that angle. And then in the third trimester, some states did restrict that, but it wasn't that. I think there's a lot of misinformation from Democrats on this, but Roe v. Wade did allow late trimester abortion. And, I mean, they got around it a little bit. They were kind of going through a loophole. They would say that it was medically necessary for, like, a mother's mental health. Just, I mean, it would hurt her experience of prom if she was pregnant and that kind of stuff. Like, that's how badly they abused it. So you did have that 1% of abortions happening in the last trimester in a lot of these states like Nevada and California and New York. So, yeah, I mean, it was we couldn't even pass a 20-week ban. So when I was in college and I went to the March for Life for the first time, I think it was 2014 or 2015, you had a new Republican majority because they'd gotten really strong after fighting on Obamacare, and you'd had Republicans kind of take that power federally. And they had a 20-week ban in front of them, which based on the polling, I think 71% of Americans would support that. But they couldn't even get past the Republican-controlled Congress. So, I mean, so there's this huge gap between public opinion and public reality, too, or political reality.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's awesome, obviously, that instead of Roe, since Roe's been reversed, the laws changed significantly in our favor from, how do we regulate this as much, it was kind of a death by 1,000 cuts. You'd have to have an ultrasound 24 hours before, which was a good thing too, because you had to see the baby. And but instead of that, we can talk about just totally outlawing it in some states, and then some states a 15-week ban. And so I guess my question is what is the strategy? Do you, because I've heard different strategies even from pro-life people. Some people say a 6-week ban is too far. you got to work baby steps so the public doesn't totally reject it. We don't go back to allowing all abortions. Do you, I'm considered more of a radical. And I'm okay with being a radical for life because my position is there should be no abortion outside of life of the mother, no matter what. And people say that's awful because of rape, and I hate rape, but I think if we're going to kill someone, we should kill the rapist, not the baby. And I'm not even a big proponent of capital punishment, but if there's a death that's got to be there, you kill the rapist. So it's But yeah, I guess that's what my question was. Is the strategy.
I think what we believe at Students for Life, and we're really vocal about not supporting any exceptions. But what we believe is that we should put forward exactly what we want, or even more than we want, and let the politicians be the ones that compromise. We don't want to be complicit in crafting what the compromise will look like, because I think what we've seen a lot is sometimes pro-life and pro-family groups will put forward a preemptive compromise when they could have gotten more. Or they'll waste their time on a piece of pro-life legislation that's really just, it's not even close to what we could be demanding from the politicians, and we could be pressuring them to do. So in like a state like Virginia, I don't think they're going to pass a life of conception bill, but I think someone should be introducing a life of conception bill each year, and you should be trying to get people on the record of voting for that, or not voting for it, so you know which Republicans need to be replaced. Mm-hmm. Strategically, if you're talking about Virginia, I think it's understandable for someone to push a 15-week ban, but we do need to be sober-minded in that 15-week ban is only stopping less than 5% of abortions, and it's not really a significant win. I mean, that was a strategy that was used before Roe a little bit more, because Roe didn't allow restrictions before viability, and so that's kind of where that was coming from. But now that we've reversed Roe, it's almost like a waste of time. Like, we want to save every baby we can in the process, but we want to lead with life and then let the politicians work out their compromises and get things through. We don't need to be the ones that preemptively compromise.
So you're saying that only 5% of abortions happen after 15? Where is the majority of abortions happening?
I mean, it's all in the first trimester. I mean, it's early, the earlier you get, the more abortions you're talking about.
Right.
I think a heartbeat bill is only addressing about 50% still.
Okay. This is my question, because I've heard a lot of controversy about the Louisiana bill, which is pretty decent. The only loophole is that women can still buy an abortion pill, and and I'd like to get rid of that too. But it seems like it can get discouraging at times, because we have modern medicine like the abortion pill, and they could probably ship it to your house through the mail. And how do we, even if it's illegal, we have illegal drugs all the time. And I guess my question is, how do we address things like the abortion pill and early abortions in a state like Virginia? I know it's got to be very hard, but...
So I think there's limitations to what the states themselves can do, because of the way we're set up as a free country. There are just limits. Like, people can go to other states and get abortions still. People can still get things through the mail. I mean, there's not a good way for us to check for abortion drugs in the mail that's going to respect people's freedom and find that balance. So I think what the reality is on that is we have to have a federal abortion ban. I mean, we're going to build up momentum in these states, but at some point we're going to have to establish the right to life at a federal level under the 14th Amendment or the Human Life Amendment. A human life amendment, I think, is going to take longer than we need to, because the right to life is found in the 14th Amendment when we're talking about a person. And they should be protected the same way everyone else is. And the 14th Amendment does establish, talking about who a person is, that all persons in their jurisdiction, in their understanding of English common law and what Blackstone the legal minds would have talked about and understood, almost everyone at the time. And in some states, they actually did, when they passed on the 14th Amendment, mention it should refer to abortion as well. So, I mean, it needs to be a federal issue, because at some point, we can't under our current system, there are no travel bans that we have in any other area. So applying it just for this wouldn't make sense. We are going to build momentum, and once we get the majority of states on board, I think we should be pushing for better restrictions in abortion.
And I totally 100% agree with you. It's just 10 times harder at the federal level to pass an abortion ban than in the state house of Louisiana or Florida. because you have such a more diverse legislature, and I really think Americans are just very mixed about abortion.
Yeah, that's true.
And some Americans and the far left, Hillary Clinton started this in 2016. Her position was abortion up until the moment of birth, which was radical then, and then Republicans are extremely mixed. You have the 15-week banners, and then you have exceptionists, and then you have the hardcore people like me and you. So I would love a constitutional amendment that protected all life, born and unborn. I just I guess I don't want to be pessimistic, but that we have to kind of realize that may not happen.
Well, yeah, but when you looked at Roe v. Wade, a lot of people have had that mentality that it's never going to happen. Stop trying to make that happen. But I mean, we have to dream big, and we have to set this vision for what we want to accomplish. So we can keep on fighting for our life at the state level, but there are going to be states like Illinois and California that just are going to keep killing babies, and so that's where the federal focus has to come in. And I mean, there's stuff like if we have a Republican president, the FDA can definitely regulate a lot of the chemical abortion pill issues. So that's partly solved there. But I mean, the Democrats are fighting at the federal level. They're pushing for taxpayer-funded abortion. I mean, they're pushing to codify Roe at a federal level. So I think Republicans have this idea that they just put their heads in the sand and they hope it all goes away, and they say that they don't support federal restrictions at all, that they're going to be able to defend it against it. But I mean, if the other side's pushing for abortion to be a federal issue, we need to respond and push for life to be a federal issue.
Gotcha. So you're saying just federal Republicans can't shy away and say this is a states' rights issue. We got to hit it head on.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a states' rights issue; it's a human rights issue. So we can start with the states, but we can't end there. And so, I mean, just keeping that vision in mind, that the end goal is and always will be protection at conception at a federal level. I mean, we could do all these other things in the meantime, but we got to cast a forward vision. I mean, maybe it'll take 50 years like Roe will, but I don't think so. I think as we get progress, we're going to pick up momentum, and it'll take a lot less time than it took the first time to get Roe reversed.
Well, I really hope you're right, and I'm right with you. I mean, in this country, we had half the states were free states, and half the states were slave states, and eventually, it took a civil war. That's not going to happen this time, thankfully.
I mean, you don't have to look back that far. Another big, significant, similar fight was honestly over gay marriage. So, I mean, I still support traditional marriage, but I lived in California at a time, back in 2008, which isn't even that long ago, that the majority of the state voted to say traditional marriage should be respected under the state constitution. And you had all these states pushing and fighting over gay marriage, and you had the majority win referendums saying they support traditional marriage. And then, even though this is something that was settled at a federal level with DOMA, they still eventually got that through the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
I mean, so things can move very quickly, and as you see momentum build at the state level, you build momentum at the federal level too. I mean, we really will. I mean, we have 15 states after a year. I mean, maybe in 10 years we'll have the next 10 states and we'll be about a majority. And then once we have a majority at a state level, I think the federal representatives will fall in line, because then you only need a few more people from other states to get something done.
That's interesting, and that's a good, it's interesting. Virginia also had a constitutional amendment, and it passed overwhelmingly that marriage was between a man and a woman. I don't think that would happen today, but it did a few years ago. It might have been 2010. I can't remember. It probably was.
Yeah, I mean, it was only 15 years ago that seemingly every state, no matter how liberal it was, still supported traditional marriage.
Well, I think California
things do shift very quickly.
Yeah, California did too, I think.
Yeah, so theirs is Proposition 8, I believe is 2008, so exactly 15 years ago. And the majority of Californians said they supported traditional marriage. That's how quickly things shifted.
Right, and that's crazy. That's a good analogy. I went back a little bit further, but I like your thinking more. So, but no, I think that's good, because I'm discouraged, and I'm encouraged and discouraged at the same time, especially for Virginia, because I've heard I've heard rumors from I have some friends in the political world that a delegate here was trying to get a 6 weeks banned, but they were discouraged very heavily by the establishment that it would never even get a vote on. And it's because...
But that always happens. That's always how it operates. I mean, it's very rare that leadership is on board with a controversial bill, no matter what it is. I mean, it happens, and sometimes you do have good Republican leadership, but generally it's an uphill fight against them. In Ohio, when they passed the first Harvey bill, it took like 6-7 years to actually get it through both houses. And then Governor Kasich at the time, he vetoed it twice in a row. So it took almost 10 years for them to get that first Harvey bill. I think it was the first one in the country, passed back in like 2018. And the thing about that, you had Roe v. Wade, the law of the land. The first Harvey bill didn't get passed till 2018. Could have been 2014, but my point still stands. It was not a long time ago where we first got those significant states restrictions actually going into play, and then we hit so much momentum.
Yeah, so that's really good. And if someone ever tells me that we shouldn't be concerned about this because there are more pressing issues, it's always, well, if these people were born, they're going to be poor, they're going to be in poverty, which is really scary to me because they don't realize that they're really saying that poor people shouldn't be alive. That's what
it's a eugenics argument for sure.
And but they make it unapologetically, and and some people will say, well, since they can smuggle in the abortion pills, I hate to say this, but I think that there will always be abortions until the Lord comes back. But that doesn't mean they should be protected and funded by the government or protected by law.
Yeah, there's a difference between it being legal and it being illegal. And there's a difference between it being discouraged and the government being complicit in it.
I totally agree. But people are still murdered today, every day.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that we offer them protection. We don't say, well, we're going to make you a safe space to murder. So, but we do that with abortion, and but I am encouraged in a lot of ways too, because I know that you've probably read, and I have too, that abortions are way down in Texas, because abortions are way down in a lot of these places, because some people can go and get abortions and get a flight. Some people, they say it'll cost me more to get an abortion than to just have the baby, so they have the baby, and I think that's a good thing. And I think it's about 100,000 lives saved over the last year. Wow. So I mean, we've definitely seen birth rates go up in places like Texas and some of these other states that took a few months to actually get something implemented. I mean, lives are definitely being saved by this situation. Well, that's 100,000. I mean, one's worth it, but 100,000 is absolutely great. Well, that's awesome. If there's anything else you'd like to leave us with, how people can get involved in the pro-life movement, I know there's different ways, or how they could contact you. You can go ahead and...
Yeah. So, Students for Life, I mean, obviously, give a plug for that. If anyone for middle school, high school, college, law, med school, even young professionals, we have various programs set up to help. One of the big things we're doing right now is the Abortion Free Cities project. And what that is especially in states like the South we were talking about, where people used to spend their time, if they're activists, being outside abortion facilities, praying and offering resources, and direct people to pregnancy resource centers. I mean, praise God, these abortion centers are closed. So now it's a question of what do we do now? And so we've been actually going door to door with pregnancy resources, offering diapers, offering financial support, directing them to where they can go get help if they need it. And that's been a really successful project. So that's something we're doing, across the country, but I know we're doing it in Richmond, Virginia, for those in Virginia. We probably have 20, 30 campaigns like that across the country now. So if you're in a major city, that might be an option. But there is infrastructure. There's all kinds of grassroots groups. So if you're not a young person, if you're not a young professional and you're older than that, there's Right to Life chapters I'd recommend getting involved in. There are pregnancy resource centers who need board members and staffers and volunteers. I think it's worth it too, to some extent, to get involved in the GOP and to make sure there's strong pro-life voices there, and that there's people who are advocating for policy and not just the candidates. Making sure we actually have candidates who are going to stick with us on the life issue. Mm-hmm. So I think there's a long list of ways to get involved, but especially if you're a young person, I'd love to have you connect with us, and we can kind of connect you to groups in your area.
Yeah, that's absolutely awesome, and I think churches do a plenty too. And if your church doesn't support a pregnancy resource center, yeah, I think it'd be good to get the two in contact. My former church, well, I mean, there's still my church. I just moved, but we didn't really know of a good pro life thing, and I got us connected. Now we do a yearly diaper drive, and that's I mean that I really think it. I really think that diaper drives could save lives because,
Yep.
I mean, maybe I'm promoting it too much, but I really think that they can because people can see that resources can be met outside of government, and that you don't have to choose to kill your baby to have ends meet.
Yeah, and I mean that's what I love about our Abortion-Free Cities program is like we were in Maryland recently, and we were going door to door, and we had this wagon full of diapers and all kinds of resources and directories of where they could go, and we're just asking people like, hey, does anyone need some diapers? Does anyone need help? And it's really cool that we can be encouraging people and building this network of support.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think it goes a long way.
Absolutely, and there's several counties in Southwest Virginia that have became pro-life sanctuary counties, like Tazewell County has, and that they're saying that you cannot have and now the state. I think the state could trump it, but I still think it's good to say pass a county resolution to say there's going to be no abortion in this county. We're going to support pro-life causes. When I was a resident of Giles, I lived in Giles County for very long. I mean, I lived in Giles County from the time I was 8 till I was 27. I just moved out 3 months ago because I got married. I went to the Board of Supervisors with the Tazewell County resolution, submitted it to my supervisor, and the lawyer that, if you've ever been to a Board of Supervisor meeting, there's a lot of times there's a lawyer advising them, shot it down. Even though we're a quote unquote Republican county, I know that these county officials are not Republicans by name, but they are voted on by Republicans. They shot it down. They wouldn't even hear me. They said the lawyer told me that government has no place in morality, which is an oxymoron because I noticed that they're still using their morality to tax me every year, and so it's really concerning. And he said that he didn't want to pass anything that had no power and was just sanctimonious. Well, but guess what, Titus? A year or two before that, we passed a bill. We passed a resolution. Making Giles County a Second Amendment sanctuary, and that everybody was inside. I mean, there was a ton of Second Amendment supporters in the board meeting, but they're okay with doing that. I called him out. I mean, he was being hypocritical because he knows that people would get very mad in Giles County if we didn't pass that, especially with the new Democrat legislature.
Well, and I think it shows a lot to do with political pressures because I remember I was in Virginia at the time when that whole sanctuary city for gun rights thing took off. And I think it was like 80 of the 90 counties, and the 92 counties, I think, that actually had resolutions passed. Like, it was all of them that were in Democrat, basically. And some of them, they had, like, thousands of people showing up and asking for the sanctuary city ordinances and resolutions. Yeah. But, yeah, on the life issue, it's just, I know that a few have passed it in Virginia, but if for whatever reason, it just hasn't taken off the same way.
Yeah. And it bothered me on a personal level, too. Not that there was a crappy politician that would stop
it. But it's hypocrisy, right?
Yeah, well, it's not only that, but it bothered me from the conservatives in the county. I made a post about it and everything, and I didn't get a lot of people that were riled up about it, and it bothered me because I know if it was about guns, there would have been 100 people in the next board meeting, and it bothers me because even conservatives sometimes care more about their Second Amendment right than the right to life of the unborn, and I think we really got to make a change in that area.
Yeah, I mean, the sanctuary city movement's really cool, though. I mean, the Mark Lee Dixon is this pastor in Texas who's been focused on it, and we are part of one of his victories in Lubbock, Texas, where they had an abortion facility, and we passed that ordinance, and they actually shut down the abortion facility, which is awesome. And it was the main one that was for most of north central Texas, like northeast Texas especially.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, that was really encouraging, and he's past like 75, I think, like it's something crazy like that now. But a lot of them are more defensive. So, like, for example, in Indiana, when now that this new law is going into effect and they're shutting the abortion facilities, they're relocating to Illinois, they're relocating to Michigan, and so he's been working on sanctuary cities to make it harder for them to move to nearby counties. So it's definitely a cool movement, and there is some progress on it. So maybe it'll catch fire. I mean, what happened in Virginia with those gun rights sanctuary cities was really something special. So it's hard to capture that magic again, but it would be cool if we saw like another wave like that.
Yeah, that's true. Well, I try to stay optimistic. I never thought I'd see Roe reversed, but I did. And every life, even one life saved, is worth all the hard work. And, well, Titus, you work so hard for protecting our unborn babies. Thank you so much for, really doing a great work to protect these unborn babies. And if there's anything else you'd like to say, or give your Twitter a plug, and absolutely you definitely can.
Yeah, I mean, I'm at Titus Folks on most platforms. So if you want to find me, you can find me at Titus Folks, or just search my name. And I got blessed with a pretty unique and weird one, so it's easy to find me. But I appreciate it, Josh. Thanks for your time and setting this up. This is cool.
Yeah, absolutely. We could have you back on one day, and you can spout some victories, or you can curse a Republican and whatever you want to do, and get a better one in there. So, well, I'll let you go. Thank you so much. And it was awesome to have our friend Titus on, who does pro-life work for Students of Life. I just wanted to do an extra segment in the middle of the week. I know most of the time I've been trying to give you an episode on Wednesday or Thursday, but this was just a really cool opportunity that I could interview a pro-life activist and organizer. And please go give him a follow. Go give the Students for Life a follow, as they work very hard to save the unborn. Please share this podcast with a friend. That would mean the world. You can find us on social media. I just like to say God bless you. Thank you for tuning in to Over Opinionated, and it's really appreciated, guys. God bless you. Jesus is King.